Friend Zone's back. We have 4 weeks till NFL training camps. We've been over some of the teams we consider underrated, but now we're going to go through specific players. I've asked the group to come up with 3 apiece. And then my list, I have 5 or 6 in case we cross over. That way we don't sound redundant. But we will start. Cody, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty great. Underrated players, something I like to talk about. And of course, all of mine are fantasy football players as well.
That's what I figured. I was actually driving to pick up my son from summer camp. I was like, I wonder if all these guys are going to twist everything into fantasy. And early indications are yes. So why don't you start us off? Who's your first
Sweet.
one?
So I wanted to make sure, like I said before the show, I got 2 guys off of here, and I'm going to pull my third one off of another piece I'm working on. My preface for this was no first round picks and no Pro Bowls. The third guy on this list for me later on in the show does have a Pro Bowl.
Okay.
But let's start off with Damian Pierce, running back out of Houston, RB21 on Underdog. So that means that when people are doing these drafts with up-to-date information, they're choosing 20 running backs before this guy. Some names around him. He's right ahead of Cam Akers at RB22, Miles Sanders at RB20. And 13 games last year, he had 220 attempts, 939 yards, 4 TDs. Receiving, there wasn't really much there. He was 17th in rushing yards last year, despite missing those games, which can explain his RB21 rank. But why I'm starting to think this guy's super undervalued is his rush yard average is 72 yards per game, which was 8th in the league. This was on a team on a worse team with suboptimal conditioning, since he never had more than 106 touches in college. If you were to extrapolate his sample size to 16 games, he would be at 1155 rushing yards, which was good for 7th in the league, and he would have led all rookies in yards on the ground. So to me, RB21 is a massive undervalue. You provide some context to this season for reasons to improve. They got their O-line, which has massive investments, 3 former first rounders, a 2023 second rounder in center Juice Scruggs, and also incoming right guard Shaq Mason. They got CJ Stroud in the draft, so better QB play should take the top off the box. And then it's not out of the question you could see better defense from this team. They got Will Anderson Jr. with the 3rd overall pick and defensive head coach D'Amico Ryans. That should set up favorable situations for Damian Pierce. So in conclusion, you got to go out there and get this guy on your team. He is being massively undervalued.
Will Devin Singletary or Mike Boone eat into his carries more than usual?
I think if anything, Devin Singletary could tap into the receiving aspect of the game, but
Okay.
I think that they've shown that they want to give it all to Damian Pierce. They ran him into the ground last year. I don't think Devin Singletary sniffs the rushing stuff. And then Mike Boone, I mean, he's a special teamer at this point to
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
I will counter you that I believe Singletary will eat into the rushing rather than the receiving. The reason being, in Buffalo, they wanted for years for him to develop into that receiving threat, and he never did, and that's why they drafted James Cook. So the receiving profile is not there for Singletary.
Well, that's good, because then if the receiving profile is not there for Singletary, then it will be there for Damian Pierce.
Yeah, Devin Singletary, the only thing good about that guy is his name. This guy drove me ballistic in fantasy for the last 2.5 years. Man, what a nightmare that dude was.
Cody, where did you get the balls to slander an ex-Viking, an ex-Bronco, and Mike Boone?
Yeah.
Different
special teams. I mean, Mike Boone's a starter.
Yeah, preseason god. All right, Wes, I recommend that you, on your list, drop the one that you most want to talk about, because I won't double up on any of the ones that you mentioned. So if you mention one guy and he's on my list, I won't talk about him. So go with who you are most excited to talk about as underrated or undervalued.
While everybody's zigging, I'm choosing to zag. Mine is kind of fantasy relevant, but it is on the individual defensive player side. I figured a lot of people would be going offense with this task, so I went defense. First one up is defensive back safety Jalen Petrie out of for the Houston Texans. This is a 2nd round draft pick coming out of Baylor. In last year's draft, started immediately and had a combined 147 tackles on the season, which led the NFL at the position. He also led the NFL in missed tackles at 36. He started the season as the strong safety, and then with a lot of those missed tackles, they switched him over to free safety, and he seemed to thrive. He also compiled 5 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery. It had him on the short list for Defensive Rookie of the Year. The Texans in the offseason, they brought in DeMeco Ryans, and this defensive unit should look revamped, look refreshed, and should help accentuate and continue to propel his growth as a player. So Petrie is one that I have, look out for. He's going to be a force to come in the next few years here.
This is like a Texans podcast so far. So congrats to their team building because it's working out. Jason, do you have a Texan?
I don't have a Texan. No. In this guy here, I don't know how much of an underdog he really is. And I know that he gets a lot of, flack on this show. Dustin, I know you're not a fan of him, but he may not even be an underdog, but Jared Goff.
No, he's on my list.
Oh man, you'll obviously have more of the educational info for our listeners, but I mean, this dude, I'm just looking at his stats going all the way. He had 1 bad year his first year in the league. Has he really been underrated? I've always looked at him like, man, that's a capable quarterback. He's always put up good numbers year in and year out, and proved that he can do it without Sean McVay, which I think is even more impressive, really. But then there's some games that he just looks like a turd. I get that, but wow. He is, and I don't know where the Lions are on this guy. They seem to be perfectly fine with him.
Yeah.
And God, they're probably going to extend him. I think I would.
It's modern day Eli Manning and the Giants all over again.
Yeah.
Except no Super Bowls.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep extending him because we're too scared to open the other door.
Kirk. Yeah, I would. But he like Eli, but fewer interceptions. He does have a fumbling problem. That's kind of been his forte over the years. But, overall, his interceptions he usually keeps at a minimum. Touchdowns, you could probably rest assured you're going to get at least 25 out of the guy. Almost 4,500 yards last year. I don't know how much of an underdog he is. I look at him, and he's always available in fantasy. You could pick this guy up whenever you want. And he could get you 30. 35.40 on some days.
I think the only reason that he isn't universally loved is because he was the first overall pick of the 2016 NFL draft. And so you've got to live up to almost like a Peyton Manning standard there. And he clearly hasn't done that. But yeah, to your point, last year he had 4,438 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. And on him being the Lions quarterback, if they underwhelm this year and go 7-10, then yeah, they'll probably say, let's use our little draft pick on the next guy in a really good quarterback draft. But yeah, they've proven in the last 2 years that a quarterback other than Hendon Hooker, isn't a huge priority. So yeah, Goff was actually on my list because you can't look at 4,500 yards and 29 touchdowns and just go, well, that guy isn't very good. It's damn good. And and their defense was horrible last year. Even when they got good in the last 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season, their defense still wasn't very good. I pulled the EPA per play, and in December and January, it was still like 23rd in the NFL in those weeks, segregated. So yeah, he was doing a lot of the good stuff for the Lions. And
not to mention, you mentioned the number 1 pick, the number 1 pick kind of stigma that he has.
Yeah.
But Alex Smith never got the hate that Goff does either, though. Right? Alex Smith was Alex Smith the number 1 pick?
Yeah, 2000.
Yeah, he was.
Instead of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, but he's never posted a season like Goff. He kind of, but he kind of picked up there at the end under Reed, but
Goff or Russell Wilson, they're going almost the same spot in drafts today.
Well, Russell Wilson shouldn't even be drafted. ever again.
That's a tough. I think
Until
I
he
would go
proves
Goff.
otherwise.
Yes, he has to.
My first underrated player is old, and he did make a Pro Bowl. Alas, last year is Demario Davis. The guy is a beast, and he's probably finishing up his career. But every year he has way north of 100 tackles. And his problem is he's not a self-promoter, and he just kind of goes from. Let's see, he started with the was the Saints for most of his career. Trying to think. Then he had stops with the Browns. No, he started with the Jets.
The Jets.
Yeah, he started with the Jets, had a stop with the Browns, and then has spent the last 5 years or so at the Saints. And last year, finally got recognition. He was a second-team All-Pro, got his first Pro Bowl out of the way, 82.7 PFF grade. And the guy is always consistent, and he never misses football games. I challenge you guys and gals to look at his resume on StatHead or whatever stat site you use, and you look at the years the games played. It's just this barrage of 16s, and then once you get to 17 game season 17s, the guy is durable as hell, and he doesn't miss tackles. And finally, he got a little recognition last year. And I could have said this guy for the last 6 years if we did this type of show. He's that undervalued. Unfortunately, getting old, so he certainly won't make the Hall of Fame or anything like that. But he's always been on my radar as somebody who is really steady. Cody, we're to you for number 2.
Sweet. So number 2, I've been kind of tooting their horn lately. The strength of schedule kind of scares me. It's worse than the league. It comes to the New England Patriots with Hunter Henry. He is tight end 33 on Underdog for these daily drafts, which is notable because it's behind tight end 23, Mike Gesicki, tight end 22, Dawson Knox, who's maybe not even the first tight end on his team, tight end 26, rookie Luke Musgrave, Isaiah Likely. I mean, he's right ahead of Logan Thomas, Zach Ertz. I think that he should outperform all of those guys. And all of them have really taken significant hits to their roles, while Henry did not. A lot of people were kind of turned off by Gesicki, but we're also forgetting that that Hunter Henry's contract is 8th out of 183 amongst all tight ends. So this guy is going to be utilized. He's Mr. Consistent as well. For those worried about Gesicki, he's 26 out of 183 on tight end contracts. And Hunter Henry's been, like I mentioned, Mr. Consistent. A down year last year with 500 yards, which is just fine for a tight end. Normally he posts about a 600. They will be returning to the 2 tight end sets under Bill O'Brien. And he had 3 top 12 finishes in his last 6 games of the season, showing that he still has it. He already has 3 tight end 1 seasons in fantasy points per game. And I definitely could see Hunter Henry adding another one in an offense that doesn't have an alpha. You know, they signed Juju. Today they signed Devontae Parker, so I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be going over there. I do think that Gesicki is going to be playing kind of like a big wideout role. So I do think Hunter Henry, whenever it comes down to 1 tight end on the field, it will be him. I expect Mac Jones to take a step back forward to where we create optimism like after his rookie year. And that should definitely post him north of 600 yards, which would be top 12 in tight ends last year.
I like that one. I like that one a lot. Wes, what's your next?
Next one, I have New England. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to follow Cody there. I will go with linebacker Brian Asamoa for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a 3rd round pick in last year's draft out of Oklahoma. He played primarily special teams and some spot linebacker duty during his rookie campaign. The Vikings jettisoned longtime middle linebacker Eric Kendricks in the offseason, opening an immediate 115 tackles per season on average. It's a pretty big hole in that defense. Asamoah, he steps right in. He is one of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's inaugural picks, and he's going to fill that hole. In games Asamoah played last year, he flew around to find the football, often delivering bone-crushing hits to dislodge the ball. He's definitely a player to watch, and it should only be a matter of time before his body catches up with his mind or vice versa. He's starting to put it together, essentially, and we should see the game kind of slow down for him to accommodate the speed and reaction that he has.
Are there any concerns about this scheme change? I haven't been like as tuned into the Vikings. I know that they're going to be more of an aggressive scheme, I believe, from their inside linebacker position. Do either of y'all have any dirt on that, or is it going to be like a big transition, or not any really worries there?
I think it'll be more attacking, more downhill, which I think benefits him. He seems to be the type of player that once he gets going, he can be a freight train and a force to reckon with. So I see him being able to step right in, and from everything I've read about Brian Flores, he tends to play to the player's strengths rather than the weaknesses. So I think that coupled together will result in a perfect harmony.
For the way that Asamoa plays, there couldn't have been a better defensive coordinator hire for him than Brian Flores, because he's fast, he's aggressive by trade, and that's what the Vikings lacked in general, and that's why they hired Flores. So yeah, I think it is a wonderful fit. And then you look at this, outside of Troy Reeder, who I don't think anybody would really classify as a bona fide starter, the Vikings signed no veteran free agent linebackers. The Vikings drafted 0 linebackers, and they reasonably could have targeted Trenton Simpson or, let's see, Drew Sanders, who now plays for Jason's team. And they didn't. They said, nope, we'll go with Ivan Pace. We'll make the undrafted phone call, and we're rolling with Asamoah and Jordan Hicks. So to Wes's point, if Asamoah doesn't start, then there's a big damn problem, because you're going to go to Troy Dye, who's built like a punter, or Troy Reed, and neither one of those dudes I don't really think should start. So yeah,
Asamoah, Namdi Asamoah. Remember that guy?
I do.
Famous
that guy was like
movie actor now.
That guy was like the best defensive back for like, what, 2 years?
Yeah, it's weird how sometimes those CBs have like the shelf life of being king for like a year. Xavier Rhodes was like a king for like a 5-6 game stretch.
Yeah. What was that one guy that used to always cover Odell from Carolina?
Oh, Josh Norman.
Josh Norman.
Oh yeah, yeah. Then he became a meme.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, he had the a lot of times, if your name isn't Darrelle Revis, then your peak as the best cornerback in the game is usually pretty short. It's weird. Who's your next guy, Jason, before we get to the final round?
My next guy is a wide receiver from your guys' team, and I'm going to go with KJ Osborne on here. Looking at his stats from last year, pretty reasonable year, in my opinion. 60 receptions, 660 yards. 5 TDs, which would have been a great year had he been in Denver. But I think with the chemistry that Cousins already has with Jefferson, we've already known that that's established, and what he has built in a reasonably short period of time with Hockenson, I think it's time that you get another receiver closer to that 1,000-yard mark. They're all going into what they've all been playing together now since for 3, this will be their 4th year.
Yep.
Yeah. 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So, growing together like this, I think that 1,000 yards is definitely within his reach. Maybe add a couple more touchdowns to that total. I think that I don't know if he's an underdog or not, but I don't ever hear anybody talking about him other than Vikings fans. Because it's Jefferson, and the occasional Hockenson now. So I think it's a good opportunity for the young man. He's only 26 years old, so definitely has the capabilities to achieve good things this year, I think.
Yeah, he certainly would fit the undervalued because he has the Jefferson shadow, which everybody would have. And then when they finally said goodbye to Thielen, it looked like he was going to be the WR2, and then boom, they drafted Jordan Addison. So it's like he got just put in the back seat, and he was in the front seat for like a month, and then draft happened. So yeah, I certainly think he's undervalued. But the good news for him is that he'll hit free agency here in about 8 months. And I don't think he stays with the Vikings, because if he stays with the Vikings, that will have meant that Addison utterly sucks, because you can't pay Osborne his 10 to 15 million per year, and then just put Addison at WR3. So I agree with you that he's certainly underrated. If I asked you gentlemen, this panel, who the best offensive lineman in football, I don't think any of you would even sniff Chris Lindstrom for the Atlanta Falcons. He's my number 2 on this list. Now, he has the draft stock where he should be good. He was picked 14th overall in the 2019 NFL draft. And I remember it well because Vikings fans debated Garrett Bradbury or Chris Lindstrom. Well, they probably should have just picked Lindstrom. Last year, he had a 95.0 grade from PFF, which is almost like a perfect football player. And that's really the only stat that there is for offensive linemen until you get deep into the analytics. And I think that quietly, Chris Lindstrom has hit that Quentin Nelson level that we kind of use as the benchmark. And he played for a team that was 7-10 last year. And, guards don't get much press as it is. But Lindstrom is a guard who was drafted with first-round draft stock. And then, 4 years into it, he had an almost perfect PFF grade. And to me, that makes him underrated. Final round, Cody, who do you got?
So I got Chris Godwin, who, just 1 second, let me pull him up. So Chris Godwin is currently going as the wide receiver 29 in daily drafts, right around Brandon Ayuk, which I'm also a fan of. But I mean, wide receiver 29, he's going behind DeAndre Hopkins, who's not even on a team. Mike Williams, who's going to be maybe a second or third tier target earner on his own offense. Christian Kirk, you could say the same for this guy. I think Chris Godwin's going to take this number 1. I think that this season is a season that Chris Godwin becomes alpha in his offense. Mike Evans has always been a factor there. And for me, he's always been kind of at the forefront of their wide receiver group. And this is the year that he's going to take a step back. Let's see. Last year, Godwin had an anomaly of a year with his receiving yards per reception at 9. So he did a bunch of things around the line of scrimmage. And then this year, they have a new offensive coordinator in Dave Canales. Canales was a quarterback coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And so you could expect to see Chris Godwin in more of a Tyler Lockett role pushing downfield. And they've said this in their interviews with him since. And so you're looking at him playing in the Tyler Lockett Cooper Kupp role. This is a significant target earner, and it's going to be at all areas of the field, not just around the line of scrimmage, where last year he had 1,000 yards with an ADOT of 9. That to me, that's insane. So we look at Chris Godwin. He's going to be 2 years removed from the injury. His targets are likely to come down a little bit between catching passes from QBs not named Tom Brady, but also not being the first read bailout option despite their poor run game over there. I think that Tampa Bay is going to have a miserable year, and they're going to be looking to get the ball into the playmakers' hands as much as possible. Chris Godwin, his betting line for yards is 925 and for this season, and to me that's criminally low. If you a gambling person, go put money on Chris Godwin 925 yards over. I mean, he's a pretty good player.
Isn't he I should just pull it up. Isn't he entering the prime of his career or right in the middle of it? Like 27, 28?
Yep. And last year you also had him coming back from injury a little bit late. So, I mean, if you remove week 1 and then he's also missing weeks 2 and 3, that's 1,000 yards on a 13 game season. I mean, he would rank, if you were to extrapolate those averages out to the length of a whole season, he would rank 4th in targets behind only Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, and Tyreek Hill. This is ahead of guys like CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce. So, I mean, he gets no hype. Like I mentioned whenever I began this segment about Chris Godwin, he's wide receiver 29.
That's wild.
Yeah, and he has top 5 advanced metrics across the board, severely undervalued this year.
Yeah, I think we're in wait and see mode to see if a competent quarterback comes out of that so-called training camp battle. I'm going to miss the days, 3 seasons of being able to draft Evans or Godwin and just know that you're safe no matter what.
It.
Yep.
Yeah, Evans has hit 1,000 10 years in a row, I think.
Oh, yeah. If you wanted to do underrated careers, Evans is another one who's not a self-promoter, but my God, that guy's resume is bulletproof. It's just so steady. All right, Wes, who's your final of the evening?
Final evening, I have Jalen Phillips, edge out of for the Miami Dolphins. He's a 2021 first round pick out of UCLA. Phillips appeared in all 17 games his rookie season, starting 4 of them. That resulted in 8.5 sacks with 42 total tackles. He followed that up with 7 sacks and 61 tackles in his sophomore season, while seeing an uptick in playing time. This season, he's ready to be unleashed in Vic Fangio's defense opposite Bradley Chubb. Although he had a dip in sacks his sophomore season, he did see an increase in QB hits, 16 his rookie season to 25 his sophomore. This will be the year that he puts it all together. I'm predicting double-digit sacks for him. He often draws comparisons to Jason Taylor with his body type and skill set. That's not saying that he's destined to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. Just that the tools are there to make an immediate impact. So Jalen Phillips is who I tap for my third and final.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, you liked him coming out of the draft too.
Yeah,
I think was that the Boogie Basham draft that you also liked, or was that one the year before it?
I think it was the Boogie Basham draft.
Okay, well. Yeah, I remember you high on a couple edge rushers that were like fringe first rounders that we weren't sure. Mm-hmm. And all right, Jason, who's your final one of the evening?
Well, Wes, yeah, unleashed in Vic Fangio's defense. I'm going to have you pump the brakes there, dude. That defense coached the Vikings last year, even though it was at Donatel.
No. That was the dollar store version.
It was same concept. So Vic Fangio's defense didn't net a single double-digit sack guy in Denver in his 3 years there. Nonetheless,
Jason, you're onto something. There's like a Vic Fangio hidden behind the scenes. His defense is horrible. I watched a video on it a while back that convinced me that all these millionaires are insane and they're idiots.
Well, that is the case. I mean, because watching your guys' defense reminded me so much of his. I mean, it is his anyway.
But I do like Jalen Phillips as well.
I gotta be, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I do like the guy, but if it depends on how apt to listen he is. Because if he goes rogue, there's a good chance he gets to double digits. But if he has to adhere to Fangio, never blitzes. None. 0. He'll rush 4.
Sounds so familiar.
Oh man, it is familiar. It's awful. It's maddening. But no. So I'm gonna be a homer. I'm gonna be a homer here on my final one, and I'm just going to simply say any skill position player for the Denver Broncos
Tim Patrick.
Are definitely underdogs. There's not a single person in the national media that looks at Denver and has any one of those guys doing anything remotely good. That's how bad this team is. But we are going to finally get a taste of, because these guys are young. They have grown together. They've gone through multiple different coaching regimes, all first-time coaches, and they've done this all without ownership at the top. They now have that, and they now have a proven leader as a coach that is competent. And I talk about this on the show often. How many players are actually busts and how many coaches are actually the problem? We will find this out soon. And if Sean Payton can turn this group of hungry young players into winners, I mean, we might be surprised at how many guys on that team can actually surprise some people. I have a lot of faith in them, but I'm just I'm a biased fan. But I gotta believe, whether it's Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, of course.
That's my sleeper pick for the Broncos.
The tight end.
Dulcich.
Dulcich was my honorable mention for the show.
You got to be able to think that with a good coach that knows what the heck he's doing, that is actually there to fix what he has also witnessed over the last 7 years. And obviously that does include Russ as well. But we'll see. But at this point in time, that entire team is definitely underdogs. No question.
My final one, and then I think I'm gonna really quickly mention my honorable mentions in a sentence or two. My final one is Alex Highsmith for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here's my story on him. He had 14 and a half sacks last year. He led the NFL in forced fumbles and had a 78 PFF grade and did not make the Pro Bowl. He was a third rounder from the 2020 NFL draft, I think. So this will be his fourth year in the league. And I don't know what's separating this dude from being a household name. I don't know if it's because one of the Watt brothers is on the other side of him and he's just overshadowed. But those stats are undeniable. Almost 15 sacks and 5 forced fumbles, which led the league. That should be a Pro Bowl, even when all the alternates, the guys go to the Super Bowl and you name alternates. I don't know why Alex Highsmith wasn't on the list. So he might not be underrated for very long, especially if he follows up this season with another large one. And then my other two are just kind of shout outs. So let's see if I can get this name right. Telanoa Hufanga. In his second year, he was a 5th round draft pick in the 2021 NFL draft. And what are you doing, Wes? You're muted and you're whispering.
From USC.
Oh, okay. Of course, that would be what you're interrupting. Yeah. All right. So a 5th rounder from USC last year in his second year was an All-Pro first team and a Pro Bowler. So he's not underrated, but he's already arrived, and he, to me, has to get a mention as a 5th round pick. If you play IDP fantasy, you probably knew who he was after about week 5 or so, because you were like, oh boy, he's not an anomaly. And then my final one, I want to say on this show, we laughed at Christian Kirk when he got his 17 or 18 million per during the free agency period of 2022. And then he backed it up. I think he ended up having about 1,200 yards receiving and was at around 8 touchdowns. And that he played up to his contract. So I think a lot of us, including me, laughed at the Jaguars for spending that much guy on who never really broke out with the Cardinals. But I have to give a tip of the cap to Christian Kirk because he went out there and he did exactly what the Jaguars signed him to do. Wes?
I'll also tap honorable mention Frankie Louvu, linebacker for the Carolina Panthers. He really came into his own last season. I don't have the tackles in front of me. Oh, there we go. It looks like 111 tackles last season. So he's a name to watch as well.
What was in a minute or less, Cody, your honorable mention list?
I got David Montgomery on there. I think that all the hype is for Jahmyr Gibbs, and he is walking into a massive role where nobody's going to impede on his carries. And if something happens to Gibbs, he's going to take that role too. So, and then another one, I've been pounding the table for this guy, Justin Herbert. I mean, you talk about all these other QBs. We already got people talking about Trevor Lawrence ahead of Justin Herbert. It's just because he's an LA Charger. He's going to have a hard time truly getting up there, and he belongs up there for sure.
I don't think anybody thinks he's an underdog, Cody.
Well, I mean,
he's top 5 in a lot of experts' opinions.
He is.
I don't think he's deserving of it yet, but
all right. So people currently over Justin Herbert are taking Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. There's 5. Justin Fields. And then Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields is explainable because of the fantasy for rushing and stuff like that. But Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence are going right neck and neck. And I think Trevor Lawrence has shown a glimpse of what Justin Herbert's been showing this whole time.
Stud,
but and then also want to toot my own horn and say I was ridiculed for saying I liked that the Jaguars signed Christian Kirk last year. All 3 of y'all burned me. I said I thought it was a good move.
You did.
Yep. But and then my last one, once again, someone else I keep bringing up repeatedly because it's probably actually gonna bomb. But Brandon Ayuk. I mean, this guy, he's getting no love. He started his season with 750 yards with only 11 games started. Then you got 826 yards, and then you got 1,000 yards. I don't think Deebo Samuel's coming back to take that wide receiver 1 crown. Brandon Ayuk, it's a contract year, which is another big one. And he got 5+ targets in 11 out of 17 total games, with 7 games having at least 8 targets, regardless of the quarterback playing. So I think that if they get any semblance of steadiness out of the quarterback position, Brandon Ayuk.
You need to get an Ayuk jersey. I think you talk about him each week. You love him like you do a quarterback.
Yeah,
I
you do like
I need to get him.
And because you like him so much, I do too now. I just do. I
can't
drafted
wait
him.
to see
I
where he
drafted him
goes
like
next
third
year.
in fantasy last year because
He's got to get a VPN to show that he's in the New Jersey, New York market, so he can go on the Mojo stock app
Right.
and buy all the shares of IU.
Yep, he's gonna go off. He is.
All right, gentlemen, we'll be back on the night after 4th of July, and we may or may not have our best ball draft. We're going to see if we can get that figured out behind the scenes. But until then, you guys have a wonderful week. All right.
All right. Good night, guys.
All right. Take it easy.
Night.